Martin.
Welcome to the special report with Areva Martin, where truth meets impact and we separate fact from fiction. Well, in case you've been under a rock, you know that U.S. education is under fire. From the suppression of Black history to attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, the classroom has become a battleground. But while many institutions are folding under political pressure, a few, like my alma mater, Harvard, is finally, and I do say finally, standing up. Today's guest is one of the nation's leading voices on racial equity and justice. He is a professor at the University of Southern California and a trusted advisor to President Biden. So get ready for a powerful conversation with a change maker at the intersection of scholarship and social impact. Dr. Shaun Harper, also a friend, I am proud to say, is joining me this morning on the special report. Wow, Dr. Harper, I don't even know where to start this conversation. There is so much happening around education, around colleges and universities, around K through 12 schools. But I think I'll start with the latest headline, which is that the IRS is looking at revoking the 501c3 status, nonprofit status, that is, of one of the oldest, the richest, and probably the most well known colleges in the world, Harvard University. What do you make of that?
Well, first, Areva, let me just say that I'm so excited to do this with you, despite the craziness of the topic. I appreciate you bringing this topic, to your viewers and listeners, and I also appreciate you having me. All right, so let's start here with the Harvard of it all. Your beloved alma mater can afford to step up finally in the way that it has. And I'm grateful that Harvard has flexed its capital and its reputation. Hopefully that reverberates throughout the rest of American higher education. I'm not entirely sure that it will because not everybody has the bags that Harvard has. So let's start there. I also want to just say that when people tell us that they're going to do something, say in a Project 2025, we probably ought to believe them. So I'm not at all surprised by this threat of revoking the IRS tax status from Harvard and other so-called uncooperative universities. They told us they were going to do that. They said it in Project 2025. There's a whole YouTube clip with then candidate Donald Trump from last summer saying, "I'm gonna come for your tax status if you don't do what I say." So that doesn't surprise me, but I hope that Harvard continues the fight. I hope that it continues to leverage its wealth and its network of alumni like you and others on behalf of all of us in higher education.
Well, if you follow me on social media, you know I've been outspoken about Harvard. Yes, they're getting all kinds of accolades and praise for standing up, and they're the heroes in this saga in this moment. But we should not forget that Harvard did sacrifice its first African American female president, Dr. Claudine Gay. And they were willing to throw her under the bus, force her resignation, not come to her defense. And I joined a group of other Black women law school alumni to try to pressure the university to take a stance against the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because Dr. Harper, this just didn't happen after Donald Trump won the November election. This has been in the works, and as an expert, you know, for many, many years. And it's because of institutions like Harvard, who do have the bags, that sat by idly and let the attacks on critical race theory, then diversity, equity, and inclusion occur without forceful pushback, that we now find ourselves in a position where the tax status, the nonprofit tax status, is seriously being questioned by the government. Just explain briefly, Dr. Harper, what would it mean if Harvard was no longer a 501c3 nonprofit?
I promise you, I'm gonna get to that question. But I follow you on all of your social media platforms, and I'm always encouraged by your content. B, I cannot let this moment pass to talk about the Claudine Gay of it all. You are absolutely right that the politicized attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion in K 12 schools, higher ed institutions, and corporations did not just start with the second coming of Donald Trump. The trap for that was set in the first Trump administration and played itself out during the 4 years of the Biden administration as conservatives, began to pass laws at the state level. They didn't have the federal lever to pass or to pull, rather, but they began to, pass these things at state levels. So that ain't new. And, what happened to Claudine Gay is a shame. It is a travesty. But it was indeed part of this larger political project to tear down DEI, to advance an agenda of anti Blackness, and to eject a Black woman from the presidency of the most prestigious university in the country, one of the most prestigious in the world, as immediately as possible. Claudine Gay was the president of Harvard University for 6 months. And I just think that it's such a ridiculous shame that folks like Elise Stefanik and others are weaponizing anti Semitism, right?
Yes.
Anti Semitism is a problem on college campuses. So too is Islamophobia. So too is anti Blackness,
Sickness.
right? And I don't know. I just think that it's gross, it's perverted, as a matter of fact, to weaponize anti-Semitism as part of the larger politicized project that really is to tear down DEI. Now, you asked me a question about tax status. What would it mean? Well, it would mean that the university would no longer qualify for federal research grants, which is huge at a major research university like Harvard. It means that they would not be able to qualify for federal student financial aid. Harvard is very wealthy, but not everybody who goes there comes from wealth and privilege. They need Pell Grants and other kinds of supplemental federal financial aid. So it would mean that, right? It would have some implications for accreditation. I don't mean to suggest that Harvard is going to lose its accreditation, but it is, nonprofit and for-profit institutions, are there are different ways that the accreditors determine the goodness and viability of those institutions. So that's just a handful of the implications of the federal tax status.
So you've been working at this intersection of policy and law and race for over 2 decades. Why do you think institutions like Harvard and Yale and other big institutions didn't recognize that this was coming? You said, look, there's a YouTube video, there's Project 2025, that all of these great institutions and all of the scholars that work at these institutions had an opportunity to read, to review. So no one should be surprised by what is happening. But you work inside one of these large institutions yourself. Why didn't they respond sooner? Why did they wait until this crisis moment where literally billions of research dollars are being jeopardized? And by jeopardizing those research dollars, we're jeopardizing critical research on things like cancer, Alzheimer's, and other critical, conditions and diseases that impact so many Americans. Why did they sit on their hands when they knew this was coming?
Okay, I'm gonna give grace. I'm gonna give at least some grace before I get to the critique. It could be, Areva, that they, like you and me, thought that Kamala Harris was going to be elected president of the United States. It could be that they presumed that there is no way in the world, after January 6th and after all of the felony indictments, there is no way in the world Donald Trump will be reelected. So it could be that they were with me on that. I thought ain't no way. So there's that. What I will also say is, like me, I was wrong about this. In the first Trump administration, there was so much chaos and dysfunction that very little got done legislatively. So it could be that those universities and the people who lead them, read Project 2025 and thought, okay, look, this is incredibly ambitious. none of this will happen because it's going to be a zoo like it was last time. And we completely underestimated the 4 years that um, Donald Trump himself, the people that he's appointed to his cabinet, and certainly conservative think tanks have invested into strategizing for this moment. We completely underestimated that, right? Because we thought it was going to be like the first time. All right, now, why haven't they done more since, right? Like here we are in the middle of April. Um, this man signed 70 something executive orders on day one to show us that he ain't playing this time. I think that, many institutions just found themselves scrambling and did not have a plan. Um, and the scare tactics worked. Like executive orders are not policy,
Right.
by the way, but they sure do have a chilling effect.
Yes.
They sure do spook institutions. So I think that many of those institutions got spooked and did not have a backup plan. Just today, Brown University announced that it was taking out a loan. A loan. Brown is an Ivy League university with enormous wealth that is taking out a loan because of the freezes to their federal funding. I don't think that, to give them some grace, I don't think that Brown was thinking back in January that it would have to be taking out a loan in April.
Right. So, what are we really witnessing, Dr. Harper? A lot of people, I think, are not understanding the significance of this. And they're asking the question, why go after universities? Why go after educational institutions? Why go after schools? Help us understand why schools, universities, and education are being targeted.
Yeah, listen, we're talking about DEI in higher education, but that's just one slice of the pie here. There is a larger assault on higher education as an entity by the Trump administration. They've made very clear that they don't like universities. They don't respect universities. They don't respect expertise. They don't respect truth, right? If they respected truth, they would not be out making these ridiculous, unfounded claims that um, discrimination is so rampant against white men on college campuses, for instance. That's not a thing. It's not a thing, but yet it is the centerpiece, really, of the Dear Colleague letter that came from the U.S. Department of Education that went to every educational institution in America, threatening to snatch their funding for so-called discriminatory programs. Look, if we want to talk about discrimination, I have 27 years of research that makes painstakingly, irrefutably clear that it's Black students who experience the most egregious and most harmful and most violent forms of discrimination, harassment, and abuse on college campuses. We got way too much evidence, not just mine. There's 50 years of evidence to confirm that. But yet, there are no legislative hearings, there are no congressional task forces, and so on going after institutions for their long track records of anti Black racism. Look, that was
I'm so
just.
glad you brought that up, Dr. Harper, because in none of these letters, and you've seen them, I've seen them printed, do they mention the university's failures to protect Black students, to root out that anti Blackness that you just described, and to call out that the violations that exist because schools have not protected Black students. Now, clearly, we don't want Jewish students to feel unsafe on college campuses.
We do not.
Anti Semitism should not exist on college campuses, and students of the Jewish faith should feel completely safe. But that shouldn't be to the exclusion of other students, whether they're Hispanic or Black or Asian or Muslim. But the letters don't talk about the discrimination that those other students face. And as you just said, historically, the pervasive nature of anti-Blackness and discrimination against Black students on campuses. Why aren't those students mentioned in any of these letters?
Because they don't care about Black people,
Okay.
period.
Plain and simple.
I mean, you could look at the composition of the cabinet. Let's start there. How many Black folks are in the cabinet? How many black folks are in influential positions of leadership in this White House? Like, just a cursory glance at, say, a class photo will confirm that no, y'all don't really, but y'all not doing black people right now. That's real clear. Um, that's it, right?
That's it's not complicated, but we need to call it out because if you look online and you look at some of the comments that are typically made, people aren't being honest. The analysis does not go to the heart of it in the way that you just did. And we cannot we can't lose sight of that. And we've got to keep calling it out every opportunity we get. Here's another question I have. Having sat at Harvard Law School for 3 years, having sat for 4 years at the University of Chicago, again, prestigious university, I didn't see all of these poor black, brown Democrats like me. I saw a lot of wealthy white kids in the seats next to me. Many of them were conservative, many of them were Republicans. Are we saying, is the Trump administration and the MAGA crowd saying they're ready to give up all of their Harvard, Yale, Brown, Ivy League seats to black and brown folks because they have such disdain, as Elise Stefanik talks about, for these Ivy League institutions? Is that what they're really saying? Is that their little kids aren't going to grow up to go to Harvard? If you look at Wall Street, all the bros at most of those Wall Street firms, Harvard Business School, Wharton Business School, some of the top institutions in the country, are they giving all of that up?
Yeah, look, as you know, I am a researcher and I really, really value data and evidence. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Harvard was locking white folks out of opportunities to become students there as undergraduates in the law school, in the business school, or anywhere else. There just ain't no evidence to confirm that. A. B. There is no evidence whatsoever that the curriculum there or any place else in American higher education has become so radically woke that it is unrecognizable. When I talk with students, conservatives and progressive students alike, and I ask them about the wokeness of their curriculum, they kind of laugh. They're like, no, actually, that's like not a thing. Like, it's only sort of Fox News commentators and conservative yahoos on social media who make up these unfounded sort of claims. They've never been in our classrooms, they've never read our books, they've never reviewed the syllabi, but they yet go and make these ridiculous claims that Harvard Law School is now just a bastion of wokeness. It wasn't a bastion of wokeness when you were there, and it's not a bastion of wokeness now.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything because I sat next to white male conservative students. Many of them are now CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations. Many of them are partners in major law firms. I have colleagues who sat next to some of the white males who sit on our U.S. Supreme Court. And I just didn't feel, as you just said, the students articulated this wokeness, this pervasive wokeness. But again, I'm trying to get at, if you take Harvard and all these Ivy Leagues down, where are those white Republican male kids going to college?
In my experience, Areva, whiteness will always find a way.
Okay, I'm just trying to see, are they saying now, black and brown folks can have these woke institutions because we don't want our kids in those Ivy Leagues being indoctrinated with all that wokeness. We're going to start sending them to Liberty University or you name it university. That's not what they're saying, really.
No, this raises for me two questions about the resistance and where it is and where it isn't. I have been plagued with this nagging question for at least a month now. Areva, as you likely know, I spent a decade as a faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania, which is also in the Ivy League. And, during my 10 years as a professor at Penn, uh, for better or worse, I often saw that the Ivies move together, that when one of them does something, the other tends to follow suit, especially if that other is Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. The others tend to fall in line, at times even copy and paste, right? It has been so fascinating to me that over these past few months, as the Trump administration has attacked Columbia for one thing, Penn for another, Harvard for another, right? They're picking them off sort of one at a time. Why is the Ivy League and the Ivy Plus? The Ivy Plus includes schools like Duke and Northwestern and Stanford, really extraordinarily wealthy, the wealthiest institutions in the country. Why are they not fighting back together?
Yes.
It could be that they're in like a super secret booth somewhere, strategizing, and we just ain't seeing it. But it's really, really, really dumbfounding to me that they're not leveraging their collective impact to fight back. So there's that. But then that leads me to the alums of these institutions. Really, I mean, as you've described, the demographic reality of who goes to Harvard, who are Harvard Law School graduates, who are graduates of the business school at University of Chicago, so on and so forth. Uh, are those alums not understanding what that means
Yes.
for the preservation of the brand of the institutions that they attended and paid so much money to attend? Do they not understand what that means for their children, the next generation of college goers? In this moment, are they just like presuming that we gonna be good, right? We'll be fine. I'm not sure.
It's so ironic because Professor Harper, the legacy status and how hard these alums fight to get their children and their grandchildren and the legacy that they want to preserve. So, yeah, it's so baffling to me. Our kids don't have legacy status. So, my little black alums, we're like, this ain't really affecting us because we don't get the same privilege when it comes to legacy status that our white counterparts get. But we know because I sat next to second and third generation Harvard students. Most of us are first gen, right? We're just happy to be there. So that is so puzzling to me that we haven't seen an outcry from both conservative and liberal alums saying hands off Harvard. That should be trendy, right? That should be hashtag hands off Harvard. That we should see happening across all social, and we're not. So, very interesting. I do want to read what Harvard said in response to the Trump administration. It said last Friday night, the administration issued an updated and expanded list of demands, warning that Harvard must comply if we intend to maintain our financial relationship with the federal government. It makes clear that the intention is not to work with us to address anti Semitism in a cooperative and constructive manner. The majority represent direct governmental regulation of the intellectual conditions at Harvard. We have informed the administration through our legal counsel that we will not accept their proposed agreement. The university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. No government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. And I just wonder, Dr. Harper, how come Columbia University, where I have two Lions graduates, how come they didn't send a similar letter when they were in the crosshairs of the Trump administration?
I'm going to give some grace.
You are such a kind, grace giving professor. I like that.
Columbia was overwhelmed. That's not necessarily an excuse. I know that some Columbia students and alumni will absolutely disagree with me on that. But I think that the forcefulness of the attack, the federal attack on Columbia University, they were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They were in a boxing ring with an opponent that absolutely overwhelmed them and knocked them out in lots of ways. That doesn't give them an excuse for being unfit for that fight or unprepared for it, but they were just outmatched. I have to be honest with you. I was there a few weeks ago, and the number of news trucks and cameras all around, it's a circus.
Right.
It's a circus that Columbia does not deserve, by the way, or no university deserves that kind of circus. No university deserves to have a presence of the FBI and, you know, other federal investigators, on the campus disrupting, teaching, learning, and community. So, yeah, they were overwhelmed.
Okay, so if the Trump administration had its way, one, it would continue to overwhelm universities in the way that it has done to Columbia. But it told Harvard, we want to insert a third party, almost like a conservator or some kind of guardianship, where we would have the ability to dictate what you teach, who you hire, who you employ. This is a private institution, and it cites its right to do so by saying you violated federal law. And when you violate federal law, we have the right to uh, claw back these federal funds. And I should note for the record that the Trump administration has produced zero evidence, and it has not followed the procedures that are laid out clearly in the federal statutes, in the regulations about how the federal government can cut off funding from an institution that does engage in any kind of discriminatory conduct. So the government is dead to the wrong. I mean, just absolutely no evidence, absolutely disregarded all the safeguards that are in place, by-stepped Congress, which has a role in this whole process. But, it's just so, again, I think to all of us watching this, to your point, how come we've not seen the strength and unity? All the Ivies rowing in the same direction, and then bringing the Ivy Plus, the Northwesterns, the Stanfords, the University of Chicago's, the Dukes along with it. Because if Trump wins this, what does education look like? If guardians can be put in place to dictate curriculum, what does private education look like in this country?
Yeah, well, you giving me much to react to. First off, let me just say that 0% evidence is an unacceptably low standard of evidence. It is unacceptably low. You are absolutely right. It baffles me that so many institutions have capitulated, changed the names of programs and offices, fired people who were doing DEI work, defunded DEI programs, and eliminated them altogether based on people who come in for you with no evidence, no evidence of
Zero.
wrongdoing. What that strongly signals to me is that they weren't committed to those things in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Period. And I don't care what they say. Listen, I'm writing this piece right now that sort of offers the it offers a narration of what folks have been telling me. By folks, I mean students of color, queer people, people who work in DEI offices, and so on. Some of whom are white, some of whom are white men, have been telling me has been sort of the narrative over the past 6 weeks. So their presidents and senior leaders come to them with a straight face, look these people in the face and say, I hope you know that we're just as committed as ever to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our commitment is so strong. It's one of our strongest values. And meanwhile, the people on the other side are looking at them like, how? How can that be? When you
Where's the evidence of it? I'm a
where is
lawyer.
the
Show me
evidence
the
of it?
evidence.
You
Yeah.
are tearing down stuff, renaming, defunding, but yet you have the audacity to look me in my face and tell me that you are just as committed as ever. The institution is just as committed as ever, but yet it was unwilling to fight
Yes.
people who came to you with zero receipts of wrongdoing. I think it's awful.
So, what does that say about allyship? Because obviously, to fight back against this oppression and this authoritarianism that we are living witnesses to, it's going to take coalitions. It's going to take alumni of these institutions, students on these campuses, donors to these institutions, academic institutions themselves. But you're telling us internally, our natural allies are saying the right words, but their actions don't match their words. And we saw that after George Floyd, a lot of the performative allyship and support. Is that the same thing that's happening now?
Look, I have the utmost respect for you. I've been trying to behave during this conversation and, not
And I
sort of
just keep digging and digging. So,
not lean into the fact that we're like actual friends, but I'm gonna hit you with a girl, allyship ain't reliable. Allies ain't dependable for nothing. They're not right. They're not dependable. Where are the allies? Right. I wrote this piece for Forbes about a year ago, um, in which I referred to them as DEI's silent friends,
mm,
and I evoked the late great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who said in moments very much like this one, it's not our enemies, it's the silence of our friends that we will remember. We should remember how silent our friends were during this time when people of color were being wrongly terminated from colleges and universities and other jobs from federal workplaces and so on for nothing, for no wrongdoing. Where were the allies? Why were they so silent? Why were they so silent as culture centers that Black folks and indigenous folks and Asian American and Native American and Latino folks fought for through the 1970s and 80s to construct on these campuses, but yet they were torn down overnight? Where were the allies?
yeah.
Why were they so silent?
Yeah, that I think it's so hard for us to believe, Dr. Harper, that people that we work with, people that we live next door to, people that we go to dinner with, people that we consider friends aren't as outraged and not just emotionally outraged, but aren't ready to stand in solidarity and push back. But we have to just open our eyes. We have to accept that which is painful to accept, that white supremacy and the protection of white supremacy is for millions, tens of millions of Americans, far more important than preserving even the democracy. And I think that is still really hard for a lot of liberals, progressives, Democrats, whether you're affiliated with the party or not, to accept. And I think it still has us scratching our heads because I go back to Harvard, as much as we are happy in this moment to see them standing up, and now MIT, Northwestern, and other universities are coming on board slowly. Harvard itself is as guilty as these other institutions. We started the conversation talking about Dr. Claudine Gay. We can go back to the assaults on critical race theory and how Harvard capitulated to many of uh, the demands that were being made at that time to uh, the attacks, I should say, on critical race theory and the demands to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, I always end my interviews with some hope. We've laid out how dire this situation is, the impact that this can have on private institutions and on education overall. But what has you hopeful in this moment?
Yeah, here's what has me hopeful. Harvard was founded in 1636. It is America's first higher education institution. Higher education as an industry in the United States is incredibly durable. I do not believe that the entire industry can be torn down overnight. Higher education will survive. It has survived in other moments, right? So that gives me some hope. Um, what also gives me hope is I ultimately believe in justice, despite the repeated betrayal of that hope by our nation's government and the nation itself. I still believe in justice. So I ultimately believe that justice will somehow prevail. Um, there will be way too many casualties along the way, but I ultimately believe that somehow, some way, justice will prevail. One of those ways is that there are people like you, Areva, who fight for civil rights. You're not the only one, fortunately, right? There are thousands, perhaps even millions of people like you and like me who are going to pull every lever that is pullable, tap every coalition that we can tap in pursuit of justice. Um, Somebody asked me recently if I felt alone right now in the fight back against the politicized attacks on DEI. And my answer was no, I got a whole army, a whole posse of people who believe in justice, people who believe in truth, in evidence, in research, who are alongside me, right? And I know that you do too. So that gives me hope.
And finally, Dr. Harper, for your students or for anyone that is trying to find their way to be a voice of opposition in this moment, what do you recommend they do? Are there any books that you recommend they read, any podcasts that they listen to? How can they hold their uh, school officials, the administration on some of these college campuses accountable, their elected officials accountable? How do they get into this fight of resistance?
Look, I'm going to answer this specifically in the domain of higher education, since that's where most of our conversation has been. And I'm going to do a thing that I don't typically do. I'm going to be shamelessly self promoting here. They should read my Harvard Education Press book, The Big Lie About Race in America's Schools. It was published last September. It lays out what that big lie is and it counters it with lots of truths and facts. So I encourage people to buy that book, read it, share it with their neighbors, their church members, their sorority sisters, and others within their communities and networks. Second, they should also buy my newest book, Let's Talk About DEI. It will be out this June. Columbia University Teachers College Press is publishing that book, and it shows us how to engage in respectful disagreements with people who have a different point of view than us, how to somehow, some way, not necessarily always meet in the middle, but at least be open to considering the viewpoints of others and how to respectfully counter those viewpoints with facts, evidence, and data. So Let's Talk About DEI is another book that people can go and pre-order right now. It'll be out in June. The third thing, we hadn't talked about this at all. I know we're running out of time. But Areva, as you know, over the past month, I've been away filming a documentary. That documentary will be out this fall, and it is about the impact that the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on college campuses are having on those institutions, on students, and on people who were wrongly fired. I encourage folks to watch the film, host watch parties, host discussion forums, in their local communities, and then there will be something in the film that inspires people to say enough.
Right.
Enough.
Without giving away the whole film, because we definitely want people to watch it, what is the top two things that you would identify in terms of the impact of the elimination of DEI programs, the impact on higher education, on colleges and universities?
When people see the film and they see folks who have lost their jobs, people who were doing good work, people who were doing the right work. It was coming from a standpoint of righteousness. People who were doing evidence based work, who've lost their jobs because they got caught in the political crosshairs. It's emotionally devastating. To see that, to hear it, right? So that's one. You asked for two. I'm gonna give you another. The other is to hear students
Mm.
mourn the loss of their mentors, their role models, their protectors, educators who were investing in them as people. To hear them mourn the loss of their multicultural affairs center, which was the only place on campus where they felt a sense of belonging. It is heartbreaking to hear those students now talk about how they're just on their own with nowhere to go, no one to care for them. Students deserve better. So those are two sort of previews.
No, I appreciate that. And that is hopeful. I am so hopeful about this fight because with champions like you, with advocates like you leading the charge, writing books, making documentaries, writing articles, that gives me hope because that says that you can reach hundreds, if not millions, of people through the work that you are doing. And when people see that we are not alone, that there are others who are in this fight, that gives them courage. And I know that this fight for truth, for justice, for equality is far from over. Far from over. But with, again, leaders like you on the front lines, out there in community, in universities all over this country, just raising awareness. I think that so many people don't really even understand what DEI is. They don't understand the impact of losing DEI on campuses. So this film, I haven't even seen it yet, but I'm hopeful that it's going to have a tremendous impact. And I just want to say to viewers, don't sit on the sidelines. You've got to get engaged. You've got to read. You've got to educate yourself. You've got to vote. All these special elections, midterms coming up, local elections, you've got to speak truth to power. Use your platforms, no matter how small or how large. Support educators like Dr. Harper who are telling powerful stories. Talk to administrators at your schools, your universities. Talk to your elected officials. Your voice does matter. Don't give up your power. It may seem really bleak in this moment, but we've been here before and we've had bigger challenges and we have overcome those challenges. And I have no doubt that we will continue to be victorious and this fight for justice will not be lost because, as you said, Dr. Harper, this is a righteous fight and we are on the right side. Thanks, y'all. I'm Areva Martin, and this has been the Special Report. And until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and stay empowered.
Calling all BIPOC college students, recent college graduates, and clinicians. Here's my story about CORE, a unique workforce development program that is changing lives. My brother is the most caring person you'll ever meet. With his autism diagnosis, my family had to fight to make sure that the resources he deserved were available. That's why my goal has always been to help children with developmental disabilities and give them chances my brother may have missed. So when I heard about the CORE Fellowship, I knew immediately it was for me. The fellowship opens doors for myself and others like me. They offer training, a stipend while you're learning, job placement, and they'll pay up to $10,000 of my student loan debt. The CORE Fellowship is going to allow me to achieve my life's purpose. They care about me, so I can care about others, like my brother. Visit the website to learn more about the CORE Fellowship. Discover your core passion, your power, and your purpose. Apply today.